Welcome to my classroom. This is a web-only event where I'm going to talk to you about where I see us headed as a country, and I want to tell you something. We've been on a rough ride. I'm 54 years old. I've seen times in the past where Americans lost faith, where we lost confidence, and each time that's happened in my lifetime, because this is the third time I've seen people lose faith in the future, we as Americans somehow always come roaring back. And this time, we have some factors that mean that we're probably not going to see what you've experienced in the past recessions we've had in the country, which is where, we go through a tough time, maybe a very tough time, but then things come back. It's my belief that this time is going to have more hazard, but also as a result, more opportunity for the long haul than we've seen in the past. Let's try to catalog what's going on here, all right? We have an unstable financial sector that only still lives because the Federal Reserve pumped in massive numbers of trillions of dollars to keep the banking sector of the United States afloat. You don't realize how close we were last fall to financial Armageddon. And I'm not exaggerating. We were really on the edge. That's why there was so much panic in the news and all that, because there was a real reason for it. And I know that Ben Bernanke isn't popular. I know the Federal Reserve is looked at as dog meat. I saw recently that they're looked at as less popular than your buddies at the IRS. Now, what does that tell you? Well, what I want you to know is that as unpopular a group as they are, and as some of the moves they did really incensed me, the truth is if the Federal Reserve hadn't done its deal, I wouldn't be here right now telling you about all the opportunities. I'd only be talking about the hazards. So is the banking sector still messed up? Oh, yeah. Yeah. The banks are still a joke. And we're a long way from having a healthy banking sector. You have to have that for a capitalist system to really work well. Plus, hey, look at all the government spending. I could sit here, and by the way, I am sitting in a chair that belongs to a buddy of mine named Neil Bortz. This is his broken down chair. He's too cheap to replace it. Maybe I should get him that for his birthday. I'll get him a nice new chair. But anyway, thank you, Neil, for letting me use your chair. But the thing I want you to know is that we are in a long-term problem here. And when I guess how long it's going to go on for, when you look at all the sectors that are in difficulty, I think we've got to, as long as when, let's say my 4-year-old is in college. Okay, maybe that sounds too pessimistic. At least till he's got his driver's license. It's a long time from now, right? So I'm really trying to make you think about this as a longer-term deal. Why do I think it's so long-term? Because we, with borrowed money and speculation, overdid everything. We built too many houses. We built too many factories. We built too many shopping centers. We have too many apartments, too many office buildings. In fact, when you look at what the pointy heads are talking about right now, the next wave of financial problems in the country are going to fall to some of those things I just mentioned. The office building sector, the shopping center sector, some of the shopping center operators are already bankrupt, apartments, all the institutional kind of stuff that's been built, we have too much of. And so we're in an era where what people will be looking at is what we have too much of and what we need to figure out how to get rid of. But all of that is just a temporary thing. Now, it may not sound to you that, 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years is temporary, but in the whole scheme of things, it is. But when I throw out a number like that, 10, 15, 20 years, Do I mean that everything's going to stink for that period of time? No way. No way. In the muddling through that we're going to be in for a while, some of the greatest opportunities come up. Let's talk about something that goes way back. If you go back to 1988, and you may not be aware of this at all because it was a regional thing, but in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver had all these new buildings that were just empty. Do you know people bought those buildings so cheap? I'm talking about office buildings. So it wasn't like I just went up and wrote a check, but people got together and bought buildings for pennies on the dollar. In fact, they bought them so cheap that they paid less for those buildings than what they rent for per year now. Think about that. And you've heard me talk in the past, if you listen to me at all, you've heard me talk about how much opportunity I believe there is for an individual looking at buying foreclosures. But it's not a short-term play, it's a long-term play. And I know people have been doing the short sales. I don't care what form of distressed sale or distressed purchase you do, the opportunity remains. The most recent stats on the number of homeowners that are in great distress who are delinquent on their homes is, hear this number? 4 million. Think about 4 million people, some of whom will work it out, but many of which are going to lose those homes or walk away from them. Somebody's going to have to buy those homes. And yes, I did say we have too many of them. I said we had too many of all those things. But if you buy at the right price, it doesn't matter if you have to wait for that excess inventory to work itself out through economic growth and population growth. Because eventually that's going to take place. And that thing you bought unloved that nobody wanted is going to come back to benefit you. That's the message I really want you to understand, is that we like to have things in little simple sound bites. The economy will be back in good shape by June of next year. We want it to be like that. We want it to be, jobs will be plentiful again before 2010 is out. That's what you want to hear from me. You want to hear from me that it's going to be like short story, happily ever after. This is not a Disney kids movie. The real situation is that the job thing is going to stay rough and tumble for a while. The housing thing is going to stay hard for a while, somewhat related. The American economy may be sluggish for a while, good long while. But that doesn't mean there's not opportunity. Now, that was an odd way of saying it. Negative, 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 but it doesn't mean negative. Okay, why do I say that? Because if you look at any recession, some of the greatest opportunities come during that time. If you think about it as a consumer, are you someone who's in great distress or are you okay? Well, a lot of consumers are just fine. And for you, one of the real opportunities is right in your own home. Nobody else wants to invest in a home right now. Invest, what a funny term for a home. Nobody else wants to spend any money on their home right now is a better way to say it. So what does that mean? It means that if you want to remodel, you want to do an addition, you want to do an improvement to your home, everything you want to do is cheaper now than it was before. The contractors who never returned your calls, who never showed up, the subs that decided it was better to go do something else like ride their motorcycle or something instead of come and do what they were supposed to do for you. They're hungry, they're motivated, and they show up and they do the work. And they do it for less money than they would have done in the past. Opportunity, right? Just as much as if you buy a beat-up house and you're like me, you lack the skills to fix it up, well, you can hire the people and get the work done cheaper than you would have in the past. You know, we just went through the Cars for Clunkers thing, which to me was just a big clunker anyway, although people did buy very fuel-efficient cars. But there's an opportunity coming with cars, too, because there were all these artificial purchases. I don't mean that people didn't buy cars. I mean they bought cars they might not have otherwise, and they bought them sooner than they would have otherwise. there's going to be a real opportunity in the car market coming up probably just before Thanksgiving that will last till the coldest depths of winter, I think mid to late January. There's going to be a fantastic time to buy a car. So people who have money, which a lot of people do today, a lot of people aren't carrying excessive debt. So a lot of people are current on their mortgage. A lot of people are in a secure job, not an insecure one. To take those three factors, I may have hit close to half the U.S. population, a little more, a little less. So because of the things that are underlying, those who are okay get the deal. But one of the great deals that I'm excited about is the one for entrepreneurs. If there is a business idea in you, there's something you always coulda, woulda, shoulda done, and you were comfortable in the job you were in. A lot of times comfortable, we really don't do what we should be doing. We do less than we're capable of because it's so comfortable. Sometimes we get shaken out of that comfort, like we got laid off. When that happens, the opportunity is there for you to make that dream, that daydream, that real dream come to life. And the opportunity for you as an entrepreneur is so much stronger right now because everything you would need, everything you'd want to do is cheaper and more available. Earlier I mentioned how we got too much commercial space, too much shopping center space, too much retail space of all different kinds. So what it costs you to, if you need retail space to open up or some type of rental space, cheapest it's been in years and years and years. People widely available, either hiring as a contractor, an independent, hiring as an employee. The equipment you need, the furniture. You can buy furniture from one of the businesses that is laying off or dialing back or has closed down and you can buy stuff. I believe, and it's a personal bias because it's what I did. It's always so much how we reflect on something is based on our own experience. But I believe that the opportunity that's there when others tell you no is when you should be telling yourself yes. The worst recession we had in terms of unemployment we've ever had was in 1980, 81, 82. We had massive unemployment in the United States. We had interest rates on mortgages that were over 20%. What we referred to as the misery index. Very high unemployment, very high inflation, very high interest rates. It was ugly. I, at 25 years old, because I was too young to know better, decided that was the best time in my life to go start my own business. Even worse, I went into the travel agency business at the time of something that is historical. If you're younger, you're not going to know what this is. There was something called the PATCO strike. The PATCO strike was where the air traffic controllers of the country decided they wanted more money. And they went out on an illegal strike. President Reagan fired all the air traffic controllers. We had nobody to direct air traffic in the United States. President Reagan took military controllers, put them into the civilian towers. The federal government imposed tight flight controls on the airlines, and we only had enough air service flying around the country just to kind of carry out air travel. Most planes were parked. Most employees had nothing to do. And then the president directed that we start these new air traffic controller training classes and all that. It takes a long time to train an air traffic controller. So in the midst of 20% interest rates, high inflation, high unemployment, and going into a business that was in the toilet because of the PATCO strike, I decided to open the doors of my travel agency. Was I an idiot? Well, maybe, but I was lucky at least, or crazy like a fox, because my rent for the first office I had was under $500 a month. Even with inflation since 1981, that still was not a lot of money. And I rented in a building that had a lot of vacancies, was able to drive a hard bargain. My actual rent was $472 a month, not that I remember that. And opened up the agency, became profitable by my 4th month, and never looked back. Eventually, the new controllers were in the towers. The economy eventually recovered and came roaring back. I opened office after office. And by the time I was 31, well, I sold my business and I moved to the beach and became a beach bum. And not everybody who opened a business in 1981 in the depths of that recession was able to have that kind of success. I was lucky, as I said. Hard work and opportunity and the right time, the right place, that all led to success. And I was grateful for that. But I want you to think about, what is it that you feel is missing in today's economy? What is it that you have? Is it an idea? Is it a product? Is it a service that you have that you can provide to your fellow American? You don't know what you might be able to create, what you might be able to do for your fellow American. Because, see, the neat thing about capitalism is that if you are meeting a need in society, you're helping that society, you're creating wealth for that society, and you're providing a living for yourself. That's why capitalism is the greatest economic system we have ever had, and until somebody comes up with something better, that we will have going into the future. So I ask you to think in terms of yourself. What can you create out of this mess that's the current American situation? It's rough to call it a mess, right? I also want you to think outward. You know, we as Americans have done so much for the rest of the world by being a beacon to the rest of the world about the value of capitalism. And so as a result, we have competitors all around us, many of which are growing faster than we are, and have needs that maybe they're not getting met right now. I want you to think also, what can you do that would meet the need of somebody somewhere else in the world? You know, we buy all this stuff from communist China. Is there something that you can do that the Chinese people need that you can make money by selling to them? Because they got the money right now, and the communist government wants the Chinese people to become more consuming rather than savers. Because the Chinese save like mad. They want them to spend a little of that money so they have an internal Chinese economy. Can you meet a need for them? And I just mentioned that as one country, and the whole idea of thinking outside the box, what you can create. Now, I talk about investing a lot more than I ever thought I would on the show. On those same lines, I want you to think about, with your dollars that you save, what are you going to do with them? I want you to think about the opportunities in investing, and I want you to think about what the opportunity is overseas. Now, I'm probably talking to a lot of people who put their fingers in their ears and don't want to hear anything I'm saying right now because I used a dirty word, investing. That's right. That's the word I used. But the wealth goes to owners. Just as if you own a business, you create the opportunity for wealth. If you invest in capitalism, you create the opportunity for wealth. And I know that you may have seen a really, really bad scenario lately. And if you're older enough, you want to ignore a lot of what I'm saying right now. But if you're younger, you want to wrap your arms around this, especially if you're listening to me and you're under age 40. See, if you're under age 40, that stuff I was talking about earlier about 1981, about Patco, I mean, you don't know what that is. The recession back then, you can't relate. But what I do want you to relate to is lots of people in history have seen their investments evaporate before their eyes and made the wrong decision next. The important thing for you to do, in spite of what I said earlier, sluggish economy, we may not go into a real recovery till my 4-year-old is driving or in college. I mean, it could be a long time. Why would I have you invest instead of just staying on the sidelines till Grant is driving a car, terrorizing people on the roads, or in college? Because the reality is that even in a sluggish environment, we're likely to see economic growth. Economic growth leads to greater value in companies. Greater value in companies flows to the owners of those companies. But the key is the international companies. There are people now recommending that because of the share of capitalism that's outside the United States, that you put 2/3 of your money outside the U.S. Now, the only people who are really going to do something like that are investment professionals. It's too hard for the rest of us to visualize putting money in the stocks of companies and countries we can't even find on a map. But the thing I want you to identify with is that we have so many countries around the world that are going to grow faster than us for a long time. Why? Because they start from a much smaller base, much smaller national standard of living. The people, if they're lucky, might have a scooter, or they might be buying their first family car. They're on the trajectory to have greater and greater wealth, and you want to take advantage of that, especially if you're under age 40. And if you are under age 40, I want you popping money in every single month into investments. If you have a 401k plan, I want you doing that. If you don't have a 401k plan where you work, which a very surprisingly large percent of people don't have an employer-provided retirement plan, maybe work for a very small employer, who knows what, I want you to do this thing called a Roth that I love to talk about and put money into it every month. I want you to get to where you're maxing out that Roth. Right now, maybe you only put a few $100s a year in. I want you to get into the habit, though, where you're putting a few $100s a month, not a year, and that you put money into the international choices available to you in the Roth provider. Now, when I talk about you investing, for most people, eyes glaze over. It's not something you're interested in, not something you relate to. If you do nothing else, I want you to buy something known as a targeted retirement fund. You set up this Roth account, and you put it in a fund based on the year you're likely closest to retire. It could be 2050, 2040, 2045, who knows what. But you just pick the year later this century that most closely resembles when you're going to retire. And then through the years, the people who manage that fund split your money out based on what's most appropriate for your age, and it gets more conservative over time. Biggest mistake younger people make is they're too afraid of losing money, and they miss the opportunity to make money. Leave that to the old farts to get to where they're afraid to make any money because they're too afraid they're going to lose money. You, on the other hand, need to seize the day and seize the opportunity to make dough. And my favorite companies you've seen on my website for setting up one of these accounts, a Roth account, Vanguard, T. Rowe Price, Fidelity Investments, Charles Schwab. I even put on my website investments that I really like for each of those. And why have I put so much of an emphasis on people under age 40? Because if I can get someone under age 40 into this game, and you start saving that money now, I'm going to change your life. I'm going to change your future if you'll buy into this and you'll do it. And that's what I'm about, is getting you to take control of your own life. If you're in your 40s, you're in your early 50s, I want you to do the same kind of investing. But you probably had to hear me say that for a long, long, long time. And going back to the cars and consumption and all that, if you're under age 40, if your car is working fine, keep driving it. You know, people under age 40 are the first generation of Americans, which takes into account both generations X and Y, that thought it was okay that whatever you want, you just buy because you can borrow the money to buy it. But that's not healthy for you long term. You got to have your goals. You got to know what's important to you. And I know it seems cool to drive the new wheels, but what's cooler is to not have to worry about payments. If what you want is a house, you want to be saving money for a down payment on that house. Not throwing $400 a month towards a car payment, or worse, a lease. The goal, the idea is, as you go through the years, I want you to achieve the goals that really matter over time, which is, in terms of finances, which is developing financial security, limiting the amount of debt you take on, and having a plan for the long term. Now, a lot of people will say, I'm not going to worry about the future. I don't know what the future is going to bring. But you know something? It gets here, and you better be prepared for it. That's why I want you to think about these things. Be cheap, have a plan, save money, invest, and remember, it's not the things you accumulate that are important. It's the people who are part of your life that really matter.